Hey Sopranos fans! Welcome to another episode here on Sopranos Street, and today we will be taking a look at Ralph Cifaretto. Ralphie is intelligent from a money-making standpoint, more creative than Spielberg, and shows some leadership potential in whipping the Aprile crew into shape. But he's also one of the most universally disliked guys in the New Jersey mob, and it's not hard to see why. His aggressive, obnoxious behavior give him an almost unparalleled ability to create friction, which led to him being involved in some of the most tense situations of the show during his tenure. Yet, he left a remarkably small footprint on the series. In this episode, we will examine how he repeatedly lucked out of these situations, how he was set up to luck out of even more had he not been killed over something relatively insignificant by mob standards, and how insignificant becomes the perfect word to describe Ralphie's lasting legacy. While we will discuss what that legacy may be, it's important for me to note here that I will not be going all butterfly effect with this. Obviously, he killed Tracy and his unborn child, etc., and anyone involved in that life period is bound to leave an incalculable wake of destruction, but for the purposes of this video, we will stick to things relevant to the series, although I am curious to see your thoughts down in the comments section. Ralphie is obnoxious pretty much right out of the gate, and the basis for his first conflict, as well as his contentious relationship with Tony, can be seen almost immediately. Despite spending years down in Miami, Ralphie expects to be made captain of the Aprile crew immediately upon his return, and to a degree talks and acts as if he already is. Tony, being Tony, immediately stomps on the idea.
You're a captain, Ralphie, when I say you're a captain.
And I'm going to turn up my hearing aid so I don't miss it.
While a certain degree of arrogance and maneuvering for position is to be expected, Ralphie's response gives us a glimpse of how his arrogance can spill over into a sort of social obliviousness that needlessly increases tensions around him everywhere he goes. He's ultimately passed over in favor of Gigi, though he continues to act in the same manner and irritate Tony. However, tensions with Tony really begin to hit a boiling point over the Tracy situation. Tracy was one of the most sympathetic characters on the show.
She was a hooah.
And despite the fact that she adored him, Ralphie showed no hesitation towards mocking her in public.
Hey, baby, I was wondering why you were.
Oh, fucking kiss me. How many cocks you sucked tonight?
37 dicks. In a row?
Later, when she insults him, he beats her to death in the parking lot even though she was carrying his child, but we'll circle back to that a couple times. This causes Tony to, quote, bitch slap him in a moment of very justifiable anger. At this point, no matter how bad what Ralphie did was, Tony was in the wrong to hit him and still called him out on it. Unfortunately for Ralphie, his arrogance teamed up with his social obliviousness, and in turning down a drink with Tony, he relinquished the moral high ground, so to speak. As he began to see his situation deteriorating, he began to reach out to Johnny Sack for help. In doing so, we see the arrogance and obliviousness rear their ugly heads yet again, as he not only asks to switch over to New York, but also mentions killing Tony not once, but twice.
I'm telling you, John, he's not leaving me a lot of options here.
Don't talk crazy.
Fuck the game, he's going down.
Oh, what are you fucking stupid coming in here talking to me like that?
Despite these missteps, Johnny Sack agrees to help Ralphie fix the situation. While this may have temporarily and superficially ended their feud, there was still a tangible tension between the two. And then Ralphie caught his first lucky break.
Gigi died taking a shit.
Tony was forced into making Ralph a captain as he was the only qualified candidate, and though some tensions remained, this issue retreated to a back burner. However, during this time, two situations were brewing which could prove to be a problem. One was with Paulie Walnuts, who felt he was owed no-show jobs from Ralphie in compensation for lost income, and the other was the Jackie Jr. situation. After he started dating Ro, Ralphie began to try and take on somewhat of a fatherly role with Jackie Jr., despite the fact that Jackie Jr. didn't really seem to want it. Unfortunately, during one of Ralphie's attempts to win over Jackie Jr., he told him the story of how his father and Tony robbed a card game, being completely unaware of exactly how dumb Jackie Jr. was. Jackie eventually ended up putting a similar plan into motion, but when things went horribly awry, he was forced to go into hiding at Omar's place in Boonton, where he was eventually killed by that stealthy ninja Vito. Now, this is one area where you could make the argument that Ralphie did have a long-lasting impact, but I'm going to take a second to play devil's advocate for him. Jackie Jr. was one of those guys who was born to die young. Aside from almost drowning in 3 inches of water, Jackie Jr. had his eyes set on the mafia life, and his Uncle Richie had started him down that path already. Even his sister acknowledged that was his dream in life, and she had been out of the house since long before Ralphie showed up, so I'm not going to put that all on him. Ultimately, I think he did his best to try and be a fatherly figure to Jackie Jr., and he seemed genuinely disappointed when it didn't work out.
No matter how nice I am to that little bastard, he still hates me.
But I love you like your father did.
Somebody's got to show him how the real world works. Kid's got a chip on his shoulder.
I believe in you like your father did.
I know it's tough on you. I'm the guy that's dating your mom.
I had sex with your mother just like your father did.
Well, probably not just like his father did, which is the first point at which we circle back to Tracy. Ralphie has the twins, so we know at some point he was interested in normal sex, but by the time he's with Janice and Valentina, he has no interest whatsoever. With Ro, we don't really know, however...
What do you get? How about your every need taken care of? Sexually, everything. All your shit!
That doesn't sound like a woman who's been doing things that she's into. Perhaps after beating his unborn child to death, he stopped having interest in potentially fathering anymore. But anyways, while it seems like the Jackie Jr. situation could have greatly increased the tensions between Ralph and Tony, since it was Tony's best friend's son, Ralphie had caught his second lucky break. By that point, not only had Meadow and Jackie broken up, but Tony had caught Jackie with girls and was thoroughly pissed at him. What could have ended up being a huge deal instead ended up just being a head game for Tony to play with Ralphie. Ralphie wasn't in the clear yet, however, and the feud with Paulie was about to create the most chaotic situation that he, and arguably the Jersey mob in general, had faced yet. Now, I'm not going to blame this all on the Ginny Sack joke. Ralphie wasn't the first to joke about her, but this time it got back to Johnny. This obviously created an almost insurmountable level of tension between the two, and Johnny couldn't even bring himself to be in the same room as Ralphie. With Jackie Jr. dead and tensions with New York rising, Ralphie decided to break up with Ro and try to move in with Janice. There's a good possibility this was a bit of political maneuvering on Ralphie's part, as it came suspiciously soon after it became apparent that his only ally previously, Johnny Sack, had turned against him, and this may have been an attempt to get more closely allied with Tony. Either way, it's irrelevant because Janice was having no part of it, and by that point, Johnny was trying to have him killed. But this is where Ralph caught yet another lucky break. John caught Ginny snacking and decided to call off the hit. Yet again, Lady Luck had smiled on Ralphie, but she wouldn't for long. Even though he died before we could see if the tensions with New York would continue, he was well set up to luck out of that crisis as well. Any lasting money disputes would have become less of an issue after Johnny Sack became boss shortly thereafter, and any personal animosities would have taken a backseat to Tony B after he shot Joey Peeps. So Ralphie's overall long-term influence on the New York-New Jersey beef was really minimal. While the seeds of Ralphie's death had already been planted, the situation that allowed them to bloom occurred when Ralph acquired a racing horse named Pyomai and a girlfriend named Valentina. Things were improving between Ralph and Tony as Ralphie continued to bring in the money even with a son in the hospital, and allowed Tony to muscle his way into semi-ownership of Pyomai. In addition, Tony also helped himself to Valentina, and, suspiciously, right after Tony tells him about it, Ralph burns Pyomai for the insurance money. Enraged by the death of Pyomai and fueled by the memory of Tracy, Tony beat Ralphie to death in his own kitchen. Ironically, the reason for his death arguably represents his longest-lasting legacy in the show, because that's when we first really see rumblings begin against Tony and Moss. But other than that, what was his lasting legacy? His influence on the New York-New Jersey conflict would have been irrelevant by the time that really kicked off. Jackie Jr. wasn't his fault, and even Sil can't remember why he killed Tracy by the end of the series, and that's what he died for. You could make the argument that he pushed Janice towards Bobby, since she saw the contrast between the two and it all occurred around the same time. You could also say that he provided a name for Tony to give the cursed Aprile crew that didn't belong to his best friend.
Cifaretto crew. It's a fucking Chinese fire drill over there.
Aside from that, despite his fascination with Gladiator and that what we do in life echoes through eternity, he doesn't seem to leave much of a footprint. At all. But I'm curious to see what you think. Thanks for watching this episode here on Soprano Street. As always, like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you at the next score.